happens in about 1,000th of a second.
While fusion reactions have been successfully demonstrated by various approaches, this does not guarantee these methods could ever be scaled up to produce electricity in a commercially viable way.
So in fusion, one of the biggest challenges we have is we know how to heat a fusion fuel, we know how to put energy in, and we've watched fusion reactions happen for a long time. The challenge is you need to get more energy out than you put in. And from Lln's point of view, it's even more important that not just energy out, but electricity out.
Heating fusion fuels to astronomically high temperatures requires a tremendous input of power. The first hurdle is to achieve break-even by producing at least as much power as you put in to heat the fusion fuel. So far, none of the 35 private companies and 81 research organizations working on fusion have broken even. But breaking even is not enough. In order for fusion power to be practically viable, you need to extract more usable electricity than it takes to run the whole fusion power plant. To do this, the rate of energy production by fusion must not only exceed the rate of thermodynamic losses, but also produce enough of a surplus to overcome all the various energy overheads in a fusion facility to produce net electricity. To understand how Lln plans on becoming the first to achieve net electricity gain, let's find out what traditional nuclear fission power has in common with most approaches to fusion. In the reactor at the heart of modern nuclear power plants, heavy nuclear fuels like uranium-235 are split into lighter elements, releasing huge amounts of heat. Nuclear power plants have been in operation since 1951, but still generate electricity the same way we've been doing it since the 1800s, using heat to generate steam that spins a turbine connected to a generator. Other thermal power sources such as fossil fuels, geothermal, biofuels, and concentrated solar power all rely on basic electromagnetic induction to convert rotational energy into electricity. Many experimental approaches to generating electricity from fusion function in a similar fashion, but Lln believes they have a shortcut.
So one of the things we pioneered is a new approach for getting electricity out of fusion. Ironically, this is actually a really old idea. In the 1950s and 60s, the pioneers around fusion said, hey, we know all this energy is in magnetic energy and in charged particles in this fusion plasma. Wouldn't it be great if we could extract that in terms of direct electricity from the fusion plasma? The problem is, a lot of the electronics required to do that didn't exist at the time. So it's taken the intervening years for us to understand more of the physics and the power electronics to be able to build the systems we build today.
In 2020, Lln completed their 6th fusion prototype, Trenta. Trenta runs nearly every day doing fusion, and demonstrated Lln could directly recover some electricity from their fusion generator.
And that has been our focus from the beginning is, can we take electricity directly from the fusion fuel, from the charged particles, from the plasma, from the magnetic field, and turn that into electricity directly without steam turbines.
Taking the lessons learned from Trenta, Lln is in the final stages of building their 7th generation prototype, Polaris. The goal of Polaris is to prove Lln can generate net electricity from fusion for the first time. Electric Future was granted exclusive access into Lln's Antares facility to get a never-before-seen look at the construction of Polaris and insights into the science and engineering behind it. The first stage of the process is formation. Tiny amounts of Lln's fusion fuels deuterium and helium-3 are injected as a gas into the formation chamber and superheated into a plasma using oscillating magnetic fields just like a microwave.
So what you're seeing behind me is the tube that we actually inject gas into this system with. So fusion systems operate at high temperature and high magnetic field. And so these tubes require very specific materials. This is made out of fused silica, quartz.
Once the fusion fuels are in a state of plasma, it's time to begin adding energy.
So in our systems, we have these electromagnets that we run large currents, millions of amps of current to compress and heat the fusion fuel. But to get that mega amps of current, we use capacitor banks.
Electromagnets are a critical component of magneto-inertial fusion.
So in a pulsed electromagnet, there's large amounts of current flowing. So that means heating, ohmic heating of the coil itself. And there's a large pressure, a large force, maybe on the order of 100 megapascals or more of force that's pushing on this magnetic coil. And so these magnetic coils have to survive both the high temperature, the pulsed nature of it, as well as they tend to operate at high electrical voltage as well.
The capacitors are charged for a few seconds, storing electrical energy, and then in less than 1,000th of a second, that energy is discharged into electromagnets wrapped around the device. The magnets invert the plasma's magnetic field on itself into a toroidal structure called a field-reversed configuration. The electromagnetic properties of plasma are fundamental to understanding magnetic fusion devices. Let's do a basic grade school demonstration. If I heat atoms of helium gas above their ionization energy with this Tesla coil, the electrons are freed from their atomic orbit, resulting in a hot cloud of helium ions and free electrons known as a plasma. Because all the particles have a net electrical charge, plasma is electrically conductive and magnetically controllable. When helions electromagnets fire, they induce an electric current that flows in a loop inside the donut of plasma. As the current flows around the plasma, it generates its own reversed magnetic field which wraps the plasma. Rather than confining a plasma on an externally generated magnetic field like most other fusion approaches, in an FRC, the plasma is self-organized, held together by its own magnetic field.
And what it allows us to do is pretty unique. In an FRC, field reverse configuration, you can actually compress, heat, move, and translate that fusion fuel. And that's what we use to be able to actually make fusion faster and smaller.
After FRCs are formed on both ends, magnets fire sequentially, accelerating them towards each other at over 1 million miles per hour.
So much like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, it's called peristaltic acceleration. You increase the magnetic field behind the fusion fuel and it applies a pressure and that accelerates that plasma.
Electromagnets accelerate the FRCs out of the initial injector system into the main fusion compression chamber, where they merge to become one large unified FRC.
They actually collide into each other, superheating, converting all that kinetic energy, all that directed velocity into heat, into thermal energy, superheating the fusion fuel and getting it primed to begin compressing and getting fusion reactions out of it.